Imagine a city so safe, so spotless, that even chewing gum is banned. A place where skyscrapers are a norm, laws are ironclad, and rarely things go wrong. But in 2008, something happened that shocked this nation. A notorious terrorist leader named Mas Selamat did the impossible by pulling off a daring prison escape. For over a year, he vanished into thin air, leaving everyone wondering, how did he do it? This is the wild story of how one man outsmarted Singapore's maximum security prison system. Let's start from the beginning. Mas Selamat bin Kastari, full name, wasn't always Singapore's most wanted fugitive terrorist. Born in 1961 in a small town called Kendal in central Java, Indonesia. Later, he moved with his family to Singapore when he was young. As a boy, growing up in the 1960s in Kaki Bukit, a quiet neighborhood in Singapore. Back then, life was completely different from Singapore that we know today. It was a simple life. Kids played in the streets, families knew each other, and everyone shared food and stories, also known as the kampung life, a traditional village lifestyle. Young Mas Selamat, or Selamat to his neighbors, was just another boy. He was running around barefoot, climbing trees, and did go to Kaki Bukit Primary School. Things quickly changed as he grew older. In the early 1980s, Mas Selamat moved to a flat in Bedok Reservoir, a bustling housing area in Singapore. There, he started a family. He married, had 5 children, and worked as a mechanic. To outsiders, he seemed like an ordinary man, a father, a husband, a neighbor. But behind closed doors, a dangerous transformation started to happen. In the 1990s, his life took a dark turn. He joined a radical group called Darul Islam, an earlier version of the Jemaah Islamiyah, also known as JI Network. By 1992, he'd become part of JI's Singapore cell. This group had ties to Al-Qaeda and wanted to create an Islamic state across Southeast Asia. In 1993, JI sent Mas Selamat to Afghanistan for military training. There, he learned how to use weapons, make bombs, and plan attacks. 5 years later, in 1998, he returned to Afghanistan to study the Taliban system, the extremist group ruling the country. He left deeply inspired by their harsh laws and brutal tactics. Mas Selamat wasn't just a regular follower, he became the leader of JI's Singapore branch. Later, he met Hambal, the leader of the Indonesians' Jemaah Islamiyah branch. Together, they started to plan terror attacks across Southeast Asia. One chilling plan was hijacking a passenger plane in Bangkok and crashing it into Singapore's Changi Airport. This could have killed thousands. Some of Selamat's other plans included bombing the American embassy and Singapore's subway system. Luckily, Singaporean authorities discovered the plans and started catching JI members. But in late 2001, Mas Selamat got a tip-off. As Singapore police closed in on JI members, Selamat escaped. He fled to Indonesia just weeks before a big raid that caught 13 suspects. His escape marked the start of a deadly game of cat and mouse. In February 2003, Indonesian police arrested Selamat in Bintan Island, an island very close to Singapore. They suspected he was linked to bombings in Indonesia between 2001 and 2002. The worst? The famous attack on Bali in October 2002. 2 bombs rocked a crowded tourist district, killing nearly 200 people. By then, Mas Selamat was living under a fake name and even had a fake Indonesian passport. When police searched him, they found manuals on building bombs and materials praising suicide attacks. But instead of terrorism charges, he was jailed for 18 months only for immigration crimes, like using fake documents. During his detain in the Indonesian jail, he tried to escape by jumping from a high window. The fall shattered his left leg, leaving him with a permanent limp. When his sentence ended in 2005, Indonesia refused to send him back to Singapore. The 2 countries had no prisoner exchange agreement then. Selamat's luck ran out again fast. In January 2006, he was caught in Java, Indonesia, using another fake ID. This time he was visiting his son, who was studying at a religious school there. Singapore demanded his arrest again, and on February 3rd, 2006, Indonesia finally handed him over. In Singapore, he was jailed under the Internal Security Act. It lets the government detain terror suspects without trial. He was held in the Whitley Road Detention Center, a prison made for terrorists. Oh, and Malaysia wanted him too. Before fleeing to Indonesia, Mas Selamat had often visited the country. Malaysian authorities believed he'd plotted attacks there as well, but they never got the chance to interrogate him. But Mas Selamat wasn't done. He had one last trick up his sleeve to show. February 27th, 2008. A day Singapore will never forget. At 4:05 p.m., Singapore's worst security nightmare began. Selamat was allowed monthly family visits, a routine security procedure. That day, his wife and children arrived, passing through metal detectors and armed guards. Prison rules required inmates to be handcuffed during visits. But Selamat's limp, a result of a broken leg from the first failed escape attempt in Indonesia's prison, made guards complacent. They left his hands free, assuming he couldn't run. As guards led him to meet them, he made a simple request. "I need to use the bathroom." That request changed everything. The bathroom was just steps away. A small room with a sink, a toilet, and a narrow window covered by a rusty metal grate. Guards opened the door and waited outside. Inside, Mas Selamat moved quickly. He stood on the toilet. He pried off the window grate. Its screws were weakened by years of neglect. Then he squeezed through the 18-inch wide, around 45-centimeter opening. His thin body, worsened by months in prison, barely fit. He dropped 10 feet to the ground, scraping his arms on the concrete. Despite his limp, he sprinted toward the outer fence. Using his shirt to protect his hands, he climbed the fence. He vanished into the dense forest behind the prison. Outside the bathroom, the guards grew impatient. After 15 minutes, they knocked. No answer. They opened the door to find the empty room, the window wide open. Panic mode set in. By the time alarms blared and search teams arrived, Mas Selamat had a 30-minute head start. Within minutes, the Singapore government launched its largest ever manhunt. Thousands of officers from the police, army, and even special forces flooded the area. Roads were blocked, schools are locked down, parents panicked, soldiers searched forests, reservoirs, and neighborhoods, but Mas Selamat was gone. For 17 hours, the search raged on. No luck. Authorities admitted later, "We messed up. Security failed." The escape stunned the world. Singapore, famous for its strict rules and top security, was suddenly the punchline of jokes. Western media called it unthinkable. The government scrambled to save face. Former Prime Minister Wong Kan Seng publicly apologized, saying, "This should never have happened." Singapore turned into a fortress overnight. Wanted posters of the fugitive terrorist plastered on buses, malls, and schools. 5.5 million text messages blasted to every phone in the country with Selamat's photo and details. Border checkpoints faced hours-long delays as guards searched every car and bag. Even Interpol got involved, issuing a global red alert to 186 countries. Rumors and wild theories began spreading about Mas Selamat's escape and whereabouts. Some believed he was hiding in Singapore's Makritchie Reservoir. Others were sure he had escaped to Indonesia by speedboat. Malaysia tightened its borders, fearing he'd sneak into Johor. The public flooded police with over 1,100 sightings, all false alarms. There were even 2 anonymous donors who offered a 1 million Singapore dollars reward for tips leading to his capture, but Mas Selamat stayed hidden. By July 2008, frustration peaked. The escape wasn't just about one man. It exposed flaws in Singapore's perfect security system. Cameras, armed guards, and high fences all failed. For over a year, Mas Selamat outsmarted everyone. He's nowhere to be found. Rumors spread even more. Some said he died in the jungle, others claimed he fled to Indonesia. Then, in April 2009, Selamat's luck finally ran out. Malaysian police captured him in Johor Bahru. Inside, they found Mas Selamat. He was weak, exhausted, and starving, but still alive. The man who had once evaded one of Singapore's most intense manhunts had finally been caught. How did they catch him? And the big question, how did he get from Singapore to Malaysia? All of these and more questions to be answered. After slipping out of the prison bathroom window, Mas Selamat faced a critical choice: hide in Singapore's dense forests or flee the country. The Johor Strait, a narrow strip of water separating Singapore from Malaysia, was just 1 mile wide. But how could a man with a limp, no boat, and no swimming skills cross it? Here's the shocker. Locals near the shoreline reported seeing empty plastic bottles floating in the water. Investigators later found a trail of torn clothing and rope tied to bottles along the coast. Experts pieced together Selamat's daring plan. He collected discarded plastic bottles, tying them together with rope to create a makeshift raft, or as the government later called it, the improvised flotation device. Under cover of darkness, he waded into the water, using the bottles to stay afloat. Despite strong currents and patrol boats, he slowly paddled across the strait, reaching Malaysia's Johor State by dawn. For 13 months, Mas Selamat lived like a hunted animal. He moved between remote jungle huts and fishing villages, relying on sympathizers for food and shelter. His limp made him recognizable, so he rarely ventured out. When he did, he wore a hat and sunglasses, pretending to be a fisherman. By early 2009, he grew desperate. He began visiting small shops in Johor Bahru to buy rice and canned food. That's when he made his first mistake. A shopkeeper in Ulu Cho, a village near Johor Bahru, noticed a limping man buying large amounts of food. The man spoke Malay with a strange accent and avoided eye contact. Suspicious, the shopkeeper alerted police. Malaysian counter-terrorism officers staked out the area for days. They tracked the man to a small wooden hut hidden in a palm oil plantation. On April 1st, 2009, at 10:30 p.m., a special branch surrounded the hut. They burst through the door, guns drawn. Inside, Mas Selamat sat on the floor, unarmed, frail, and too weak to resist. He hadn't eaten properly in days. "Don't shoot, I surrender," he reportedly said. Authorities later revealed he'd been planning to flee to Indonesia by boat but lacked the money to pay smugglers. Let's clear up the rumors. Is Mas Selamat dead? No. Is he still in prison? Yes. Today, he's a detainee in solitary confinement at Changi Prison. Singapore's government can hold him forever under the Internal Security Act. It allows indefinite detention for terrorists. Will he ever be released? Almost certainly not. Prison officials say he's kept alone in a cell with no contact with other inmates. His days are spent under tight surveillance. No windows, no chances to escape. Mas Selamat's story is a mix of luck, clever planning, and human error. He outsmarted a system that everyone thought was perfect, but his freedom didn't last. Today, he's a ghost, alive but forgotten. His escape changed Singapore forever. The government spent millions upgrading prisons, adding cameras, fingerprint scans. As one officer said, "No one will ever repeat what Mas Selamat did." Thanks for watching.